Have you ever sat awake between midnight and 3 a.m. wondering why you suddenly can't sleep? Why your heart feels heavy and the room feels different? What if I told you those hours aren't random, they're sacred? Kathryn Kuhlman believed that between 12 and 3 a.m. something invisible begins to move. It's not just stillness, it's a spiritual shift, and if you've been missing it, you may be sleeping through the most powerful invitation of your life. There's a reason why the hours between midnight and 3 a.m. feel so different. It's not just that the world is asleep. It's not just the silence or the darkness. There's something else, something almost unexplainable, that seems to shift in the atmosphere. You can feel it if you slow down enough. The air feels heavier. Time moves slower. Your thoughts aren't just thoughts anymore. They echo. Kathryn Kuhlman understood this. She didn't just acknowledge those hours. She leaned into them because she knew something most people ignore. There's a window hidden in the night when heaven leans closer. This isn't superstition. This isn't poetry. This is what happens when the noise of the world finally fades and the voice inside you begins to awaken, and not just your voice, but something higher, something calling, something present. There's a reason people talk about visions, dreams, and sudden clarity coming to them in the early hours. It's not because their minds were clearer, it's because their distractions were gone. And when the distractions disappear, the spiritual becomes undeniable. Kathryn used to talk about how stillness is the true sanctuary. Not the stage, not the crowd, but the quiet. And if you've ever been awake between 12 and 3, not because you wanted to be, but because you couldn't shake the feeling that something was pulling you, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's not insomnia. That's invitation. Something stirs your spirit, not to torment you, but to get your attention. And here's the part most people miss. You don't need to do anything dramatic in that hour. You don't need the right words. You don't need a ritual, you just need to respond, because that moment, when you feel the pull, when your body is tired but your spirit is restless, that's not you losing sleep. That's something sacred asking for your presence. Heaven doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just whispers when the world goes quiet. Kathryn believed that. She lived it. She often spoke of a sensitivity that only comes when you train yourself to notice the subtle. Between 12 and 3 a.m., the veil between the seen and unseen seems thinner. You're not distracted by the demands of the day. You're not performing. You're just present, and in that presence, something powerful happens. You begin to hear what you couldn't hear before. You begin to feel what you'd numbed all day. And for a moment, you're not just a person lying in bed. You're a spirit being reached for by something eternal. Kathryn didn't chase noise. She didn't need the crowd to access power. She understood something deeper, that presence meets presence, that when you become still enough, aware enough, surrendered enough, something begins to shift in the room. Not always in loud ways, not always with flashing signs, but with weight, with peace, with clarity, the kind that doesn't make sense until it settles over you and changes the atmosphere. These aren't just mystical ideas. If you've ever sat in that silence, heart open, eyes barely adjusted to the dark, and felt tears fall for no clear reason, then you've touched it. That feeling that you're not alone, even though no one else is around. That moment when your burdens feel both heavier and lighter at the same time. That's what Kathryn tapped into, and it wasn't because she was special. It was because she was sensitive. She didn't ignore those moments. She honored them, she showed up for them, and in doing so, she experienced things many never will. Between midnight and 3 a.m., there's a meeting taking place, one that doesn't require your perfection, just your attention. There's wisdom waiting to be revealed, healing ready to be released, strategies whispered from above that can only be heard when your own voice goes quiet. But you have to be willing to stay awake, not just physically, but spiritually. You have to be willing to let the restlessness push you into a moment rather than away from it. Kathryn knew that when the veil is thinnest, even the smallest act of surrender becomes amplified. A whisper becomes a weapon. A tear becomes a turning point, and silence becomes sacred. That's the mystery of those hours. That's what you've been missing if you've been sleeping through them. Because when heaven leans in, it's not always during the day. It's in the quiet, in the still, in the dark, between 12 and 3, when no one else is watching. There's something about midnight, not just the time on the clock, but the feeling it carries. It's the moment where one day ends and another begins, yet everything still looks the same. Midnight doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't announce itself with clarity. It just arrives, quietly, often unnoticed. And yet it holds power that most people overlook. Kathryn Kuhlman believed that midnight wasn't just a time of day. It was a threshold, a spiritual moment where endings and beginnings collide. A moment heavy with potential. It's no coincidence that many people feel their lowest around this time. The room feels colder. The silence feels louder. The weight you've been carrying all day suddenly presses harder. Your thoughts become sharper. Your regrets echo louder. It's in those moments that some start to wonder if they'll make it through. That's not a weakness. That's the nature of midnight. It pulls everything to the surface. The truth is, midnight exposes what the daytime buries. Kathryn understood that the deepest darkness often comes right before the shift. That moment where everything feels still, where nothing around you looks different, but something inside you knows. Something is changing, and you can't see it yet, but it's there. That's what makes midnight so sacred. It looks like the end, but it's not. It's the turning point, the moment between despair and decision, between breakdown and breakthrough. You see, midnight is where most people give up. That's the hour when hope feels far, when prayers feel unanswered, when silence starts to feel like rejection. But if you can hold on, if you can keep your heart open in that space, something begins to shift. It doesn't always make sense. It doesn't always come with feeling, but it comes, because midnight, by its nature, is transition. And transition always feels like tension right before it becomes transformation. Kathryn didn't romanticize pain. She didn't pretend midnight was easy, but she did believe it was necessary. She believed that some of the greatest miracles are born in that moment when you feel like giving up but choose to stay. She knew that midnight doesn't just test your strength, it reveals it. Because when everything in you says, this is too much, and yet you lift your eyes, even if your voice is shaking, even if your faith feels small, that's where real faith lives. And it's in that moment that something sacred happens. Not because your circumstances change, but because your perspective does. Kathryn often said that power isn't found in pretending to be fearless. It's found in being honest enough to say, I'm afraid, but faithful enough to keep standing anyway. That's what midnight calls for. Not perfection, just presence, just a willingness to say, even in this dark place, I'm still here, I'm still listening. Most people wait until things get better to pray, but Kathryn would press into those midnight hours, not just for answers, but for alignment. Because midnight doesn't always give you what you want, but it always gives you what you need: clarity, peace, stillness, a reminder that you're not forgotten, that what you feel is not the full story, and that the story isn't over just because the light hasn't come yet. That's what makes midnight so powerful. It's deceptive. It looks like nothing is happening, But underneath the surface, everything is shifting. The day is turning, heaven is moving. The silence is not absence, it's preparation. You may not see the sunrise yet, but the earth is already tilting toward it. And the ones who choose to stay, to wait, to whisper prayers into the dark, they don't just survive midnight. They are transformed by it. Kathryn knew that miracles don't always arrive in the daylight. Sometimes they arrive at midnight, disguised as the strength to keep going, disguised as peace in the middle of chaos, as tears that carry healing, as stillness that breaks confusion. If you can see midnight for what it really is, a spiritual crossing point, you will begin to understand why it feels so intense, because all of heaven is waiting for your response. Not your fear, not your perfection, just your yes. Midnight may look like the end, but it's not. It's a doorway, and once you realize that, you'll stop fearing it. You'll start meeting it. You'll say, if this is the hour heaven wants to speak, then I'm listening, even through the pain, even through the silence, even through the dark. Because some of the most life-changing moments don't happen when everything is clear. They happen when everything is still dark, but you believe the light is on the way. And that's why Kathryn never ran from midnight. She ran to it. There's something about the night that makes everything feel more intense. The silence is louder, the worries are heavier, the questions echo longer. Between 12 and 3 a.m., it's like the weight of everything you've avoided during the day suddenly finds you. And it's not just emotional, it's spiritual. That time isn't empty, it's active. It's not just a pause in your schedule, it's a pressure point in the unseen world. Kathryn Kuhlman knew this well. She didn't treat those hours like ordinary time. She treated them like a battleground, because while the world sleeps, something else is awake. Most people don't realize that the darkest battles aren't fought in front of crowds or in daylight. They're fought in the silence when no one's around to see it. When the only person awake is you, in the presence of something that feels either terrifying or holy, those hours, that's when decisions are made. That's when fear tries to rise and questions try to overwhelm. That's when the voices that tell you to quit get the loudest. And yet, right in the middle of that pressure, if you're willing, you can find power that you've never touched before. Kathryn didn't stumble into this truth. She lived it. She often spoke about the way the atmosphere feels different in those hours. She didn't deny that darkness tries to press in, but she knew something else too. When you dare to pray during the darkest hour, you touch a level of authority that doesn't come any other way. Why? Because it costs something. You're tired, you're drained, you don't feel holy or inspired, but you show up anyway. That kind of prayer, real, even broken, that kind of prayer moves things. Between midnight and 3 a.m., you're not just speaking into the air. You're stepping into the realm where the unseen becomes active. Thoughts are no longer just thoughts. They become weapons or wounds depending on how you respond. Kathryn understood this. She didn't wait until she felt strong to pray. She didn't wait until her surroundings were comfortable. She prayed in the tension. She prayed in the questions. She prayed when there was no audience, because she knew those were the moments that shaped everything else. There's a reason spiritual attacks intensify during those hours. It's because those hours are vulnerable. That's when your defenses are down. That's when your heart is open. That's when memories you've buried start to resurface, and doubts you've ignored all day suddenly demand answers. But those hours are also holy. They are strategic, and if you choose to pray not out of performance, but out of presence, you'll begin to experience something few ever do. Power doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's silent but heavy. Sometimes it's not about the words you say, but the decision to stay, to kneel, to whisper, to cry. Kathryn's greatest spiritual victories weren't just on platforms. They were in private, in rooms where no one saw her, in moments when she could have turned over and gone back to sleep, but instead she sat up, placed her heart in God's hands, and let the stillness become her sanctuary. That's what these hours offer, not a stage, but a secret place. A place where you're not required to have answers. You're just required to be honest, to say, "This is hard. I don't know what to do, but I'm here." And in that moment, something shifts, not always in the room around you, but in the atmosphere within you. Confusion begins to quiet, pressure begins to lift, and even if nothing changes externally, something inside you strengthens. Kathryn didn't walk in power because she avoided the dark. She walked in power because she faced it head on. And not with fear, but with faith. That kind of faith isn't about feeling good. It's about being grounded. It's about choosing to believe that even in the darkest hour, you're not alone. That even when no one else sees you, something greater is watching and responding. That's the power of 12 to 3 a.m. The battle may be invisible, but the victory is undeniable. These are the hours when fear meets fire, when silence meets surrender, when the unseen war is met with unseen strength. And the ones who rise to meet that moment, who pray even through the pressure, they carry something different, not because they're better, but because they were willing. So the next time you feel restless in the night, the next time you sense that strange heaviness and don't know why, don't dismiss it. That could be your moment, your battleground, your invitation to step into a power few ever tap into. Because the night isn't just a place where battles happen, it's where breakthroughs begin,